Olá, sejam bem-vindos. Hoje a gente vai para Hungria, falar de Tokaj, mais precisamente de Oremus, um projeto de tempos Vega Sicilia, num país inusitado. Eu também, quando degustei pela primeira vez o projeto, fiquei absolutamente impressionado que o grupo que faz Vega Sicilia, Pablo Álvares, tenha escolhido ir para a Hungria para buscar alguns dos melhores vinhos doces do mundo. E hoje, para conversar comigo, Robert Kindl, diretor geral da Vinícola Oremus. Robert, thank you very much for taking your time to talk with us. Tell us a little bit of this beautiful story of Tokaj in general and Oremus in particular. Welcome to Brazil. It's your first time over here, isn't it?
Thank you. It is the first time in Brazil and in South America as well. So I'm really excited. I was before the trip as well. I didn't know what to expect, but so far I like it. So maybe I don't know. I have opportunity to come in the future more often. Maybe with the family. I've shared some
Great.
photos with the family, and they excited. They want to jump on the next plane.
And you not even went to
haven't
you
seen
arrived in
anything.
São Paulo yet,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you didn't
Yeah.
go to the most beautiful place like Rio de Janeiro
Of
or
course.
the south of
I
Brazil.
haven't even seen São Paulo properly because I've been busy with our importer and the colleagues to work together and make the most out of my very short time here.
Okay.
But I have a good feeling about my being here and the effect. So hopefully we're going to see when we follow up on this trip later on. But I think there's a good.
We are experiencing a very positive moment for great white wines in Brazil.
Very good.
The market share of white wines have been increasing a lot, and this year we reached our peak where one of every 4 bottles imported to Brazil are white wines. So we can start talking.
Considerable.
I would like to cover 2 things: the history of your beautiful region, and also to move a little bit in your white wines as well. So,
Of course.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Tokaj?
Absolutely. It's a very, very long story. And I suppose in the last, since communism, since the fall of communism in Hungary, quite a lot of things happened, like quite a lot of things happened in the world itself, because everything is just happening much more fast than before. But the story starts about 700 years ago, more or less, when we have records in Hungary of a type of winemaking which was pretty much the predecessor of the actual that we know now, that we know today, traditional Aszú winemaking, which meant harvesting dried grapes, so desiccated grapes. It was an evolution, it was a process for the first maybe 200 years. And all of this process culminated in a royal decree in the 18th century. Specifically, the regulation really started in the year 1700. With the Prince Rákóczi. He was a nobleman with a great influence in Hungary at the time, and he had properties, including properties in Tokaj, a great size of properties. And he wanted to make sure that those villages where this type of recognizable, unique winemaking process, grapes and climate, is protected. And so he was the first person or the first official to actually put it in writing that those 27 villages, which we still identify today, would be protected and a border sort of created around them so that all of the focus can go into the future success of these wines. Now, the next important official document was a 1737 royal decree, which reinforced this 1700 rules. Those first rules in the 1700 were more about the winemaking and viticulture processes, what to do, what not to do, how to do things. And in 1737, it added this decree the vineyards as well, so the single vineyards. Around those 27 villages, all of the vineyards, single vineyards, Vino de Pago, were identified as being first class, second class vineyards. Right. So the classification took place. That's why we have the first vineyard classification of the world. There's another one in Porto. Also,
many people think that in Bordeaux it started in Bordeaux, but actually not.
No, I'm saying Porto.
No, I understand. What I said is that people think that the classification started in 1855 in Bordeaux, but you were 100 years prior to that.
Yes, I mean, it's different because from when Bordeaux actually did their classification, almost everything was about Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And still, Bordeaux is much more a well-known name. So, whatever people hear the most will,
but
will
you
sort of
have it
consider the
in
right information.
1730. Yeah.
1737, that was the royal decree and specified the vineyard classification, actually. So the terroir-based system. And then in Porto, there was a classification, the first DO, actually, we may say, goes to Porto, because they did the regions classification, not the vineyards, but the region.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting that all of this classification in Hungary has actually been relied on and reinforced as well a couple of times in history, leading up to the phylloxera, for example. And we still rely on it today. It's not in the regulation, like there isn't an actual prerequisite for you to operate in the wine region based on the vineyards. But when people, investors, for example, look for opportunities, then they do look at this classification, and there is a hierarchy of these vineyards. So yeah, those were the forming times. One important thing also happened when it comes to how we actually make this wine. In the beginning, this sort of wine, which we call Aszú, the first mentions of Aszú come from the 15th century. But at that time, and before that time, it wasn't compulsory to actually pick the grapes for this specific wine, Aszú, one by one, uno por uno. That came with a tax exemption, which was introduced by the royals in the 16th century, because they recognized that they can actually make an even better quality if the grapes are picked separately, collected, and then later on mixed with must.
Okay.
More complexity, bigger concentration potentially, lower quantity.
Okay.
Also, but much higher prices. So it became sort of a commercial process to specifically grow grape wines for the Aszú berry. And then they, that's how it changed practically, because the nobles, it was actually pretty much reserved for the nobles to actually make wine. The growing was, available for the people there, everyday people as well. But the actual winemaking was looked after the nobility or monks.
Okay.
Because the religious ties, different religious orders were involved also in the development of the Tokaj winemaking, just like in other famous regions of the world.
And then you have a booming region with recognized wine, and then suddenly comes the Iron Curtain, and it ceased to exist. This region, as you know.
Yeah, for the most part, the fate and success of the region was tied with the fate and history of the country as well. We had Mongol invasion, for example, in the 13th century that affected everything in Hungary, devastated the winemaking and the population as well. Then we had the Turks invading and actually being present in the country, occupying the country for 150 years. Wow. It also devastated the wine production. This was actually one of the reasons why Tokaj became even more famous and preferred, because the southern part of the country, where a lot of the winemaking before actually had taken place, was occupied. So those winemakers and some of those grape varietals actually migrated into the northern part of the country, including Tokaj. So there was a big change then in a positive way as well. But after that, right after the occupation of the Turks of 1/3 of the country, this prince Rákóczi had a lot to do with the regulation and also with the success of these wines, because so the country was broken into three parts: a Hungarian part, a German emperor occupied one part, and the Turks occupied the third part of the country. And when the Turks were beaten by this coalition of European forces and Hungarian forces as well, most of the rest of the country, or the part of the country where the Turks were occupying, became occupied by the German emperor, and so this Prince Rákóczi started a freedom fight.
Okay.
And actually, for a large part, he funded this war of independence by selling Aszú to the royal courts of Europe, to the Tsars, to Russia, Catherine,
yes,
Tsaress, and then the Pope, and to the French King Louis XIV.
Incredible.
We have a motto in Tokaj. We have had it for hundreds of years. It's very famous, which says, "Wine of kings, king of wines." In Latin, actually, at the time, Latin was, the sort of official language of Hungary, and the masses, like the people, spoke Hungarian. But yeah, so Louis XIV and other royals really enjoyed and appreciated Aszú, and so he could fund, this Prince Rákóczi could fund the wars based on Aszú. That helped to popularize Aszú, and that's one of the big reasons why it became famous. And then later on, with the Austrian occupation and the fortunes of the country was sort of fluctuating, but the export and commercialization of the Aszú had always been important, up to phylloxera, when phylloxera devastated the all of the vineyards in Hungary. So everything had to be replanted on American rootstock. That was end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And from then on up to the Second World War, the fate of Tokaj again was looking up, was improving. And then after the Second World War, we had communism up to 1990. So between 47 or 8 up to 1990, the first democratic elections in Hungary.
And during the Dom Pablo Alvarez told me that during communism, the Oremus infrastructures and vineyards were not taken care properly, focusing on quality wines and this kind of thing.
On the contrary, the focus was on quantity in communism. So between these years up to 1990, there was actually just one state-owned company or entity, sort of a cooperative, which was in charge of growing the grapes, making the wine, and selling the wine. Well, not selling really, because in communism, the system the economic system was a planned system. They had 5-year plans for the country, and then no matter what happened, you had to go with that plan. And it was the same in all of the ex-Soviet countries and in the Soviet Union as well. So that meant for Tokaj, for example, to produce 20 million bottles of Tokaji Aszú, and it was exchanged because this system was based on barter and not exchanging money. So we produced wine. Other countries in the Soviet bloc produced, let's say grains or textiles or whatever, or finished products like shoes, and there was a certain amount given or exchanged for a certain amount of Aszú. And that guaranteed the market and the huge quantity. And they actually, in that sort of system in agriculture, built up everything towards the ability to make as much wine as possible, which meant Soviet machinery. The Soviet machinery was bigger, bulkier than the Western type of, European machinery. And so you needed wider rows. And you needed, because you had less number of plants per hectare, you needed varietals and clones which could produce much more. But of course the quality was lower, because the higher the yield is, potentially
we know the lower what we focus on quality brings to the wine quality. So
and basically they were just using everything, and what was traditionally built or planted was not used. Either was abandoned. These vineyards, for example, high up on the hills, terraced, very nicely, beautifully terraced before the Second World War, were all abandoned. And the old system of planting wines, which was pretty much meter by meter, like in Burgundy, and bush wines or Goblet, Vaso, was also abandoned. So they planted vineyards on the flat because it was easier for the machinery. It was much more easy to mechanize.
Were you able to bring back to life this old vines, or did you have to replant everything?
At first, we didn't know such small pockets of vineyards existed with old varietals or old clones. So we were focusing on the best parcels, the best vineyards, first-class vineyards to buy, because we know that essentially the most important is the soil, of course, microclimate and varietal as well, but you have to have the right soil to be able to actually produce a unique wine. And so we focused on the land, and for a while we used the old vineyards, especially in the first few years in the 1990s, but we started a replantation program, and on those vineyards we replanted into denser rows, and at that time there were only the so-called communist clones available, so we didn't have the genetic material to change this. And so only at the end of the 1990s that we discovered a vineyard with such old vines, densely planted with old clones and things like that, which is called Petrac. Today we actually have a single wine as well called Petrac from this very vineyard, because in the meantime we realized that the material there, the grapes are very special, and they can make a very special wine. The essential philosophy of the company is not necessarily like in Burgundy. We do recognize, and the basis is the first class vineyards, but we blend. We benefit from the different locations, microclimates, soils, and grape varietals. And we do a lot of blending sessions before we find the final perfect blend for all of the wines, except Petrac.
Dom Pablo started with 30 hectares. Now you are about 100 hectares.
We have altogether 110 hectares for wine, but we're not producing on all of that, because every year we replant one part of the vineyard. You have to do that just to regenerate, just to renew your wines, because commercially we usually use these vineyards for 30, maximum 40 years.
When did Tempus Vega Sicilia actually arrived at the region?
I think they started looking around 1991. But it took practically 2 years to find the right locations and the right offer. The government actually created these packages for the international investor. With in each you could find historic properties like buildings in ruin, and subterranean underground cellars also in ruin, and vineyards that were, usually producing but were not in a really good condition. So that's why Dom Pablo said that everything was in bad condition, everything was set up in the wrong way. So we had to do everything from scratch from the start.
And yesterday we tasted the Tokaji Aszú 5 Plutonios 1993, which was actually the first vintage released as Oremus. It was an incredible opportunity. It's quite emotional to be able to drink the first vintage.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for us as well. We always put away 500 to 1,000 bottles of Aszú wine as library wine, for us to be able to follow the path of the wine, the development of the wine. Of course, the objective is to be able to produce Aszús again, which can develop and be a nice wine for 100 years or more. We know that from experience, because Dom Pablo had the chance to purchase a few bottles of very, very old wine, which gives you that sort of assurance or potential or opportunity. And that's our aim, that these wines that we are producing would be wines which the family or the company or our kids will be able to taste and be amazed by the quality, as much as we were amazed by the quality of these wines from the 19th century, which we could taste.
Incredible. Did you had the chance to taste these wines?
Yes, I did, because it was when the company was 30 years old. We had this anniversary,
Great.
these anniversary events, dinners, and we were down to the last two bottles of these two vintages, 1876 and 1867, just one bottle of each, and we drank them very happily.
Very
They were
good.
absolutely fantastic.
And is there a good correlation between what was happening at the time in terms of wine and what is happening today? Is there a connection line between the styles and this kind of thing?
Sure. Yes. It's recognizable. We don't know the exact recipe, what we were doing, and a lot of the other winemakers in the 1990s as well, that there are books, winemaking books and history books describing the actual winemaking, Aszú making process in the different centuries. And so we have an idea of how much was produced in the vineyard, in what sort of setup, how many wines a hectare, and the quality of these wines. We know a lot about the wines which were produced in the most successful eras of the history. And so, for example, these two wines from the 19th century were in balance and in the concentration were quite similar to what we are producing today for a 5 Puttonyos.
Interesting,
So
because even though you are using now a crafted stock and this kind of thing, it was able to keep the terroir strong enough to fulfill its mission, isn't that?
Of course, it's a very, very interesting and important question. If you get the same potential, for example, and the same structure, the same sort of wine or a very similar sort of wine, when you produce wine on its own rootstock or on American rootstock. Of course, these days there are very few places in the world where they can still have these sort of wines. Maybe you have some in Brazil here, but certainly some in South America. But we don't have any really in Hungary. So yeah, we can only really expect what we have produced ourselves. So these days, like you say, we have 1993. We actually have older vintages made by Oremus also, because when the company was purchased, then we could purchase some wine in barrel, some stock as well.
Good.
So we didn't harvest the grapes for those wines, but we had been following those wines, aged a little bit more, and then bottled in Oremus. So we can look back to over 30 years, 30 to 40 years, to the wines that we have made or partly made, and also vintages well before, because we have some older vintages in stock and some bottles before the First World War. Actually, we have some bottles from before the First World War, and we keep tasting those very rarely because we don't have many bottles, but we keep looking back. So we have a good idea that the wines we are producing today should have that kind of potential.
I love the 2000, so 2000 that we tasted yesterday, but you prefer the colder vintage.
Yes, that's right.
Like 93 and 2014, isn't that?
Yeah, or 99, for example. Those are two vintages we compare very often, 99 and 2000, because they contrasting. 99 was a cooler vintage, and so the character of the wine actually reflects that with these greener reflexes like mintiness and a certain type of savory character. versus the 2000, which is more concentrated. It still has more fruit, more fresh fruit, and dried fruit as well. Very interesting comparison, but both have a great potential.
I love it in the 9-3 that it brings you this joy of sweetness, but in the end, it's almost dry.
Exactly.
So it's an incredible journey that you've in perception.
And little by little, very slowly, these sweet, concentrated Aszú wines will give you this sort of experience. And when they are, I would say that you start noticing this change after they at least 20 years old, 30 years old, depending on the vintage, because from the colder years with more botrytis, it appears sooner, this sort of almost salty, savory, drier character. And gradually they develop this more and more. That's the beauty of Tokaji Aszú.
Yeah. We usually connect Tokaj with Furmint as a grape, but in Aszú you bring other varieties as well, don't you? Can you tell us a little bit more about Furmint and also the other varieties?
Sure. Furmint is an autochthonous varietal, and it has been grown in Tokaj since, I think there are mentions in the 13th century, 13th, 14th century, so for a long time. Genetically, it is believed that it evolved in the area within the Carpathian Basin.
Okay.
And it's mostly grown in Central Europe, the vast majority in Hungary, but you can find it in surrounding countries as well. Some Furmint shows up in Australia as well, or some of it is grown in the Finger Lakes, in the New York Finger Lakes. But I think its home is in Tokaj. It really appreciates volcanic soil, and it has an ability. It's a relatively neutral varietal for character. It's not an aromatic varietal. But for the same reason, it can show you, it can translate or show terroir in a very clear way. So that's very important for us, because we have this beautiful volcanic terroir with rhyolite and andesite and a bit of loess here and there covering the volcanic base rock. It's a great potential for the development of flavors for the wines. And of course, we dress the wine up as well in the maturation process, using a bit of oak and then still tank and stirring the lees so that Furmint is nicely rounded. It is very important because it's got a very good phenolic structure and it has high acidity.
Yeah, the acidity is incredible. In the white wine, we feel it a lot.
Yes, you see it in the purest form in the dry wine, but it's essential for the Aszú because this guarantees longevity.
And the balance.
Yes, and the balance, of course. Yeah.
But what about the other grapes? Because I couldn't even say the names of many of them.
Okay, so before Phylloxera, there were dozens of other varietals, including red varietals grown in Tokaj for hundreds of years. But when Phylloxera came, then the lawmakers and the local winemakers decided that they would prefer to focus on the most successful 3 varietals which had been grown in Tokaj pre-Phylloxera. They were the Furmint, a varietal called Hárslevelű, and a type of muscat apathy grains, because that muscat had been grown for hundreds of years as well in Tokaj, but there was Pinot Noir, for example, and a lot of other varietals could be found in Tokaj. But after Phylloxera, it was these 3 up to the Second World War. And part of the reason why they were successful, these 2, other than Furmint, the Hárslevelű and the Muscat, is the aromatic potential of these 2. Hárslevelű meaning in English linden leaf, has this kind of almost jasmine-like sort of honeysuckle type of very nice aromatic character. It can develop sugar in the berry quite well, which is important for the concentration and you know for the style of the wines. And then muscat, you know, everybody knows it quite well. Very aromatic with the pure grape flower type of aroma, and can also generate sugar quite well. And of course, at that time, although there was dry wine, but it was for local consumption, or for, you know, not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily taken so seriously, or there wasn't a focus very much on a dry wine that should last a long time and it should be so elaborated. So at that time, the focus was on whichever varietals can get botrytized easily and well.
Okay.
And these three all were proven varietals to give you a good botrytis character on the berries.
And you were telling also that you had a specific clone that would benefit the botrytis because it was more tight. And then when you were looking to produce a very good dry white wine, you looked for a different kind of clone.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. Essentially what happened after the Second World War, because this company which managed the Tokaj production wanted to have the kind of Furmint clones which had big bunches, big berries with a lot of liquid and quite a tight structure.
Okay.
Because this can guarantee you botrytis to appear every year or most years, and a lot of juice, a lot of liquid, and so material to work with when you want to produce a high number of bottles. And those are okay, and they still sort of legitimate today as well for the sweet wine. Although we are actually just starting our research program. We have been, based on the dry research program, we could identify the grapes which are the clones which are of Furmint, which are suitable for the dry wine. But in the process, we eliminated from the old clones the ones which were not so suitable because they got more botrytis, they were more compact, and that sort of thing. So now we are going back in the research to plant and research and monitor these varietals, and then later on vinify them and see if the quality of that wine is better maybe than the quality of the Furmint grapes that we have for the sweet wine now in the vineyard as well. So we're making that comparison. But everything takes years, so we don't know yet exactly. But it looks quite certain that, and that's the assumption, that the quality will be better, but you can't have the same quantity. For these, we will probably be able to produce less Aszú, but at a higher quality level. This time what happens is every 1 out of every 10 years we can't produce Aszú because it's too rainy or the other conditions are not right and that sort of thing. And then you have 3 sort of weaker vintages. Maybe 3 average vintages, and the rest 2 or 3 can be exceptional vintages. But when we change these clones in the suite as well, we might only see maybe 50% of those years in the 10 years to be enough for us to produce Aszú, because Aszú means that for the dry wine, for example, we expect something like 6-7 tons ideally per hectare on average. In some parts higher up in the hill, you may only get 4 tons. So it depends on the year, really. But more or less, that's what is viable economically, if you will, if you want to, sort of optimize what you do in the winery. But for sweet wine, for example, you can have maybe 1.5 tons of late harvest, and then from Aszú, you're lucky when you can get 250 kilograms, so 0.25 ton of Aszú berry per hectare. It's very, very low. So when you have a different type of clone, which may botrytize less, but in a better quality, maybe you only get, 50 kilograms or maybe 100 kilograms. So these are the ratios. So we have to be careful. We are always looking for a better quality in the wine and in the raw material, in the grapes as well.
But one thing that I would like to mention is that many times we don't see the same number of occasions to consume sweet wines as we did in the past as wine consumers. Yes. But when I see this unique let's say capability of Aszú of bringing sweetness and then a dry finish, and yesterday we had some pairings that went very well, and I would like to taste it more. You can bring sweet wines to other moments in a dinner or in a lunch or in a moment to enjoy it, and this is something that opened my mind to say, okay, I need to drink more of those wines.
Maybe it'll be radical what I say, but certainly my preference is usually not to have our sweet wine with dessert.
Okay, I don't think it brings anything well, it's good, but what brings the contrast pairing is much more interesting in terms of drinking the sweet wine.
Yeah, to me, for one thing, if you are planning on actually having a full meal, including dessert, then you have to decide if you actually want to have a dish as dessert or a wine as dessert. The two together can also go well, but it can also be too much.
I love it. Yesterday, I loved the idea of tasting it with different cheese.
Yeah.
Rather than
different.
With the sweet.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that completely. And I, for one, actually always go for the wine because it is almost impossible. I mean, of course, there are fantastic chefs and all, and desserts as well. Yeah. But it's really, really hard to actually match the natural flavor and the natural balance, the natural richness and complexity of these wines. And so I always enjoy the wine as dessert and not have dessert. I have dessert as well, but it's not necessary that I have them at the same time, the same way. Very often, actually, I prefer to have the sweet wine as an aperitif. And if I want to pair these wines with some kind of dish, then I like to pair them with entrees or starters.
Nice.
For example, they can go really, really well. But I exactly agree with you on the cheese. Cheese to me is top 3 pairing of the Aszú wines or the late harvest as well. And then I like to have salads as well with especially the late harvest, because when you make the salad in a way that it's not so tangy and it's not so, acidic,
nice.
But you have sort of sweeter components in there, roasted components in there, and even cheese in there with the salad, with the green leafy salad, then it will instantly pair really well with the sweet wine. And then, of course, one of the classics is foie gras. It's fantastic. I love foie gras with even as a dessert like that. So it depends. You can have these sweet wines at the beginning and at the end as well. But I think everybody would do well to consider a non-sweet, not necessarily a dessert with the wine, either at the beginning or the end, but something more savory. You only have to think about the different flavor classes, flavor profiles to go together well, and you can find a lot of savory dishes, like I said, with a little bit of like beetroot. It goes really well in this composition, and pine nuts, roasted pine nuts, for example, or you know what, walnuts. Walnut is really great, and dried fruit. If you have in the salad dried fruit, for example,
it's
a bit of cheese, a bit of walnut, of course, blue cheese would be perfect, and your green leaves, it's fantastic.
I'll try that. Because with foie gras, I already did, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
But I didn't have in mind to do it with the salad, and I'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is great. Which brings me to another side of Oremus with the dry white wine, which I loved, and that ages very well. It pairs very well. So it's an incredible. Even when you start with mandalas, and it's a very pure form of ferment, and I love the wine. And then Petrarch, which is mind blowing.
I'm really happy that you appreciate the wines and you see our wines, how more or less how we see them. It was quite a long and consequential process to elaborate and to create these two wines along each other, because we started with Mandolás in the year 2000 officially. We were producing dry ferment before as well, but we were testing more or less what we want. And it was the time when the trends changed in the world as well. The world was starting to be interested in dry white wines more or less at the end of the 1990s. And so Don Pablo decided that the wine we were making at the time was looking good and we should give it even more focus. And so it was first in the year 2000 that we decided that the wine is ready to be shown to a wider public. And, you know, we put this label on Mandolás. It's one of the single vineyards because it's a blend of 4 or 5 first-class vineyards that we have. The word Mandolás comes from the meaning is almond in Hungarian. The full name Mandolás is it has the meaning of almond orchard or almond trees, you know. And practically what it meant in the old times, the wine growers actually had the vines interplanted with different fruit trees as well. For different reasons, but they coexisted very well. These days it's less common, but I think we're actually going back, certainly at Oremus, we're thinking to see the effect of trees planted around the wines or in the wines as well. For example, they can provide shade and they cool the vineyards as well. So it's more and more important to look at things like that in the vineyard. But yeah, going back at the beginning, so we purchased the Petrarch vineyard in the second part of the 1990s, and soon it was obvious that it can make great wine, so why not put it in Mandolás as well as a blend. And it was part of Mandolás for a while. for up to 2016, more or less.
Okay.
Because around about 2014, it became obvious that Petrac can consistently make such an exceptional quality that even though the philosophy of our winemaking doesn't necessarily reflect that, but why not have a single vineyard when we have something so special? And so it's an exception to the rule. We introduced the first Petrac wine under its own label in 2017.
Okay. And it's more mineral, and is the soil changed a lot in Petrac? What happens
Yes,
in that?
it's
What is the
completely
secret of Petrac?
One of them is the soil. Yes, I think this single vineyard has a special situation as well. There it is, the aspect. It's a southwest facing vineyard, so it gets just enough sun. Now, with how the climate is changing, it's also changing very little, but in a very positive way also. So the ripening is more and more reliable in this vineyard as well. So essentially, most of the vineyards that we produce grapes for Mandolás has rhyolite.
Okay.
Different types of rhyolite, but it's all rhyolite for the most part, and different amounts of loam or clay as well in the mix. It depends where you are in those vineyards. At the very top, the soil is very thin with hardly any clay, and then as you go down, we actually part of the story is that we break up the vineyards in a way that the top part, the top third, would be for dry wine production in these particular vineyards anyway. The middle can be either or, depending on the vintage. If it's a wetter or cooler vintage, it's usually late harvest or Aszú. If it's a drier year, then we might add some fruit to the Mandolás from there. And the bottom is always for Aszú, because that's where you have the thickest soil, the most water in the soil, so the most capacity for generating botrytis. And so, yes, rhyolite
I assume
mostly.
that Petrac is in the top.
Petrac is very high up, yes. All of our vineyards are situated between 180 meters to 250 meters, or 150 to 250, more or less. And Petrac is at the upper end, 250
And the
meters.
soil over there?
And the soil is not rhyolite, it's also volcanic, but it's andesite, and it's much more lean. There's no clay whatsoever. The topsoil is very, very thin, about 30 centimeters in the top part, a little bit more as you go down the slope, but still it's very well draining, so it dries out very quickly. It can also be a problem because we can get periods of drought when the wines will suffer. So it can be sort of a double-edged sword, but like you say, the minerality is special, and we have 60-year-old wines here, those pre-phylloxera, hundreds of different clones of furmint. So the wine, what we get there as grapes, is a synergy of all of those different clones of furmint. That's the other big reason why it's special.
One of the things that amazed me as well is the way you manage oak in this wine, because it creates a body that I think that with the fruit, but with the huge acidity, promises longevity. And I would like you to talk a little bit about that, if possible.
Yeah, essentially, in both cases, for Mandolás and Petrac, we whole bunch press. So, of course, we pick everything manually. In Petrac, actually, even the cultivation has to be done manually. So we have our colleagues, our vineyard workers, to do everything by hand because the rows are very narrow and the slope is very steep as well, so we can't have a tractor in there. If we need to plow the soil, then we have a horse and the horse drawn plow to do the plowing in between the rows. And so we do the canopy work manually as well. Of course, in the other vineyards, in the Mandolás vineyards, we have wider rows, so the tractor can go in there, but not in Petrach. And so we manually pick the grapes. We cool the grapes down as well, so we don't process the grapes straight away, but the grapes will be waiting several hours or even until the next morning to be processed. They're sitting in the crates in the meantime. And then we have a sorting table, so they would be emptied onto the sorting table, and our colleagues, our winery workers would be standing on either side and taking out everything that looks too green or maybe shriveled, or any mold, like any material which is not grapes but leaves or anything like that. So we don't destem these grapes. They will follow onto the conveyor belt, and on the conveyor belt they will arrive to the presses one level down, because the winery is gravity fed. It's also very important because this way we can have a gentle treatment of the grapes all the way until they actually are transferred in the barrels for the fermentation. But yeah, so this is the top level where we do the sorting. The next level is the pressing. Another level down is the level for the fermentation, the actual winery. And then under the road next to the winery, we have a line going from the winery into the historic underground cellars. Again, by gravity, the juice or the freshly fermented wine would go in there, and then the aging is done in those tunnels.
And what about the how do you manage the vats? Is it Hungarian oak or French oak? What do you do?
Here is where the differences come in after the pressing. 70% of Mandolás must would go into steel tanks, 30% into Hungarian oak barrels for the fermentation. We can use a little bit more new oak for the fermentation because the fermentation process helps the oak to be blended in more than when they are aging in the final barrels where they are aged. And then for Petrach, everything goes into barrel for the fermentation, so fully barrel fermented. The majority is French oak, Burgundy size. And French oak, Burgundy barrel producers as well. And then the fermentation is about 10 days in both cases. For Mandolás, the wine is actually transferred, the freshly fermented wine, into 70% of the wine, into Hungarian oak barrels. The new oak is about 10 to 15% in the mix, whereas Petrach will be wrecked from the barrels. They will be transferred into steel tank just to wash the barrels, and then they would go back in the barrels for the 10 months. Mandolás is aged in barrel for 6 months, Petrach for 10 months. And so it's 100% Hungarian oak for Mandolás and about 80% French oak for Petrach, and the rest Hungarian oak barrels. And for Mandolás, in the recent years, we use bigger barrels. I would say that now the majority would be 300 and 500 liter barrels. We went up in size because we realized that the phenolic structure and the tannin is more integrated when we go up a size or two. And so the oak influence can be more subtle.
And so we have a wine that's been made for some time, but it's constantly evolving. And I feel that every time that I taste a new vintage, I see that's in the recent year more vibrant, and yet more clean and more direct wine, and with a huge age potential.
One thing we've actually evolved as well is how much the wine spends in bottle, because Mandolás spends minimum 1 year in bottle. In cases like 21, because it was a cold vintage, we felt that it needs a little bit more bottle aging, so we gave it another half a year, I think.
This is good. So that's probably why I feel this difference when I taste a new vintage, because it arrives in the moment you decide this is the proper moment for us to taste.
We don't want to cut corners. We don't work based on the market, or less so as other wineries. So whenever the wine is ready, we give it time. Whenever it's ready, it's ready. If it's not ready in such a relatively short time, then we give it more time, because otherwise we would, not be true to our philosophy of Vega Sicilia and Oremus as well. So it's essential for us to do that.
The only thing that I don't like is the very small allocation that you send from Tokaj to Brazil, because I love the wine, but it's very hard to buy some bottles over here.
I know. Yeah. We're working on that. In case of, I suppose, Mandolás is more widely available, or can be more widely available. But Petrach we only produce, in case of the 2020, which we tasted yesterday, something like 3,500 bottles.
Okay, for the whole world.
And up to all the way the 2022 vintage, this was more or less the quantity. From 2022, we have been changing, we have been working better in the Petrach vineyard. So the crop now is more reliable, we do much more things, and we're much more reactive. So the result is, and we actually planted some new wines with the same bush wine system in 2017. So the idea in Vega Sicilia and Oremus as well, not to use the newly planted grape wines, the grapes from the grape wines, until they're 10 years old.
All right. This is the same rule.
So Petrach, fruit from that enlarged Petrach is coming on stream slowly. So in the future, you will see more like 5,000 to 7,000 or 8,000 bottles.
Very good.
We'll be able to produce. So
I'll be
hopefully
glad.
more allocation.
A little bit more allocation to Brazil.
Yes, I hope so. Yes.
Robert, thank you very much for your time, your attention. It was really an amazing and very informative talk we had today.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, and it's been my pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Salud.
Esse programa é um oferecimento Adega Online, o marketplace oficial da revista Adega.